Albert Ostman is my name, and I've always worked in logging or construction. I thought I deserved a vacation in 1924 after working on a construction project for more than a year. Looking for gold mines was one of my interests, and British Columbia was famous for its gold mines. Therefore, I made the decision to spend my vacation there and investigate, which drove me to the top of the Toba Stream Gulf. I took a steamboat to Lund. I hired an elderly Indian to take me to the Toba Inlet's head in British Columbia. This Indian man loved to talk, telling stories about a lost mine where it is said that a white man brought gold out. He'd be away for a couple of days, spend a lot of money in saloons, and return with a gold bag. On one occasion he left and never returned. According to locals, a Sasquatch killed him. I had no idea what a Sasquatch was. I inquired about it with the old Indian. He explained that they were massive beings with hair, more like human beings than mountain animals. He said that his uncle saw footprints, 2 feet in length, and he personally saw one that was more than 8 feet tall. He heard me say, "I didn't believe in these myths about giant mountains. They might have existed a long time ago, but not now." The Indian just looked at me and said that although there were few left, they were still there. We in the end showed up at the top of the Gulf late in the early evening, and I set up camp at the creek's entrance. I told the old Indian to look while he stayed for dinner. Out for me in about 3 weeks, with the intention of camping there when I return. I got my rifle the next morning, but I left most of my gear at camp. I wanted to locate deer trails that might take me higher up into the mountains. I wanted to check out a mountain pass that I saw as I explored the inlet, the majority of the afternoon looking for a trail, but all I found was a hogback running to the beach. From there, I went bushwhacking on a trail and went back to camp. My gear for being was packed that afternoon. And now we will take a short pause. I want to remind you that you can buy a t-shirt with a Bigfoot from our partners on Amazon. Haven't you wanted this for a long time? Right? Ready for the following day, my gear incorporated a 30-30 Winchester rifle, and a handcrafted prospecting. One end of the pick has an axe on it. I attached the pick to my belt and made a leather case for it. Using my knife, my provisions basically comprised of canned products, bacon, beans, prunes, macaroni, hardtack snuff cheese, pancake flour, butter, and canned milk. I also received tins from the shopkeeper to keep them dry with matches, salt, and sugar. I intended to conceal some food beneath a fallen tree close to camp, so I would have it upon my return. Everything ended up in my backpack: a slumbering pack, ground sheet, a little skillet, and an aluminum pot for water. As I finished the food, I figured I'd have a lot of cans left over for cooking. The subsequent morning, I repacked, had an early breakfast, and started the hogback. At least, my pack must have weighed 80 pounds other than my rifle. I needed to rest after an hour of trekking. I went on hiking, and resting all morning until I reached a flat area with a lot of willow below a rock bluff. Trees. I built a wooden shovel there and dug for water. The water began about a foot down to seep in, so I decided to set up camp there for the night and investigate different options for heading up the path. Wow, what a view when I got up the mountain to about 1,000 feet. I could see straight tugboats with long booms and fishing boats moving over the islands. In every direction, it was stunning. I spent the following day prospecting, but I didn't find any. Minerals, for example. I found a deer trail driving towards the miss I'd saw on my way the inlet. I went back out early the following morning. It was cool outside, however the path was steep likewise. My cumbersome pack made matters no easier. I was worn out after climbing for 3 hours. Furthermore, chose to lay on the opposite side of a gorge. I could make out a yellow spot from where I was resting. I moved there and started digging for water below some small trees. I made a little digging tool from cedar bark and tracked down a little spring. I was able to get just enough water to drink and have lunch. I finally made it that night after resting until evening. From that point, it was all declining, which was unquestionably simpler. But I was hungry and exhausted, so I established camp in the first group of trees I encountered. As I attempted to evaluate the territory, I chose to travel upper east, as going west would take you to the lowlands of another inlet. I covered the entire day in good time while going downhill, around 10 miles until I found a little spring and a major dark hemlock tree. An ideal campground. I rested and looked for opportunities there for 2 days. I shot a small deer the first night, which was really contributed to my food supply. After 2 days, I found an extraordinary campground close to 2 great estimated cypress trees near a stone wall with a decent spring just beneath them. I chose to make this my super durable between the trees. I set up camp and cut a lot of brush for my bed. I attached a pole to the rock wall to place some rocks for my fireplace and use as a hook for my backpack. The arrangement was really nice, and at that point, things started to happen. I've been told that I sleep a lot and that nothing wakes me up, particularly on a decent bed, like the one I had made here. I noticed this the following morning when I awoke. Things had been upset. I sat down and roasted a small game because it appeared that nothing was missing. Bird that I had earlier purchased for breakfast. That evening, I topped off the magazine of my 30-30. In addition, I carried 6 additional shells in my coat pocket and a full box of 20. I positioned my rifle beneath the edge of my camping bed, thinking perhaps a porcupine had visited me. Since porcupines adore leather, I placed my shoes in the sleeping bag's bottom. I discovered that my backpack had been empty the next morning. The sack had been turned upside down, but the shoulder straps held it on the pole, where I'd put it. That is the point at which I saw a half-pound bundle of prunes and my flapjack blossom were absent, but nothing was done to the salt bag. This appeared to be odd since porcupines love salt. I sought out tracks, however, saw as none. I didn't figure it very well, maybe a bear, since they, as a rule, destroy things. I remained nearby camp for the following couple of days, in the event that anything it was returned. I scaled on a big rock from which one could see the camp well, but nothing appeared. Sincerely, I believed it to be a porcupine, so I could prepare a satisfying stew. For the subsequent 3 nights, the visits continued. On a specific night, it appeared cloudy and threatening to rain. The arrangement of everything particularly impressed me and ensured the closure of my backpack. Something picking me up jolted me awake at once. I was half asleep and couldn't remember where I was at first, but it quickly came back. My initial thought when I was in my sleeping bag on this prospecting trip was, since there is no snow around my camp, it must be a snowslide. After that, I felt like I was thrown on the back of a horse. But then, I felt someone walking. My thoughts were racing, trying to consider the animal that this might be. I attempted to reach my knife and remove my bag, but the knife was underneath me and I was almost sitting. I can't snag it, however. The rifle was before me and had great hold of that. At times, I was not going to let go of it. I could feel the cans rattling around on my back and my backpack touching me after what appeared to be an hour. I could sense that we were ascending a steep hill. I felt like I was being lifted up. Every move. I occasionally heard a slight cough as the thing that was carrying me was struggling to breathe. This had to be one of the enormous mountain squatch that the old Indian had told me about. I knew now. I couldn't move and was in a very uncomfortable position. One of the boots was on my foot while I was sitting. The sideways cross my foot in the bottom of the bag was extremely uncomfortable. I couldn't move, though. It was fortunate for me that the sleeping bag did not get too hot. The creature's hand was too small to seal the entire bag. There will still be when you pick me up. A tiny slit at the top. I would have choked to death otherwise. As of now, he was presently going downhill. At times I felt like I was being dragged and could feel myself touching the ground. After that, he seemed to be on level ground and trotted for a while. But this time I'd packed a portion of my legs and the aggravation was horrendous. I had high hopes that he would reach the location. I couldn't stand this movement any longer, so he left quickly. He then took another pill, which was less painful. I attempted to estimate the distance and directions while this was going on. As close as I could figure, we were on the road for about 3 hours. I had no clue about what time it was when it began when he picked me up while I was asleep. He finally came to a stop and let me down. He then fell. My luggage. I could hear the jars clatter. I heard some kind of abnormal babble, similar to some sort of talk that I could not comprehend. Since the ground sloped when he released my sleeping bag, I finally poked my head out and breathed in some fresh air after rolling a little bit downhill. I attempted to crawl out and straighten my legs. However, my legs were severely numb. It was as yet dull out so that I was unable to see its appearance. In an effort to revive myself, I massaged my legs, put them on, and put on my shoes. It sounded like there were 4 of them now, and I could hear standing around me and continuing to converse in an odd manner. A Sasquatch has never occurred to me. I didn't really believe in them before, but now I knew I was right there with them. I had no idea what they wanted, but I had to figure out how to escape. I got to see the diagram of right now. It was cloudy with a light sprinkle as I started to get lighter. The feeling began, returning to my legs, but the top of my left foot, where it was resting against was extremely sore. Boots. In the lower part of it, I had my compass and my prospecting glass on a string around my neck. My glass was in my right-hand pocket, and the compass was in my left shirt pocket. I could see where I was, but I was in a small valley or basin. It was around 8 to 10 acres on the southeast side, surrounded by high mountains. The opening formed a V shape, approximately 20 feet high and 8 feet wide at its lowest point. That has got to been how I entered. Be that as it may presently, how would I get out? The old Yeti was presently sitting close to this opening. Close to the west wall, where there were 2 small cypress trees, I moved my belongings, and thought this would work well as a shelter until I found out what the creatures want from me and how can I escape this situation. To see what I had, I empty my backpack, left out of the food line. I had 1 can of coffee when I got home and the goods were still intact. Also, despite having 3 small milk cans, 2 hard tack packages and butter, my prunes and macaroni were also absent. My knife and the full box of rifle shells in my possession. I was unable to find my matches, but I was aware that my prospecting glass could light a fire. When the sun shone brightly, despite my efforts, I was unable to locate any dry wood. I carefully examined the valley, but the boy and girl creature were always watching me from behind some juniper sprig. I concluded that there must be water nearby. The ground was leaning in the direction of gaping hole in the wall. Then there should be water at the upper finish of this valley where the green grass was. So I went looking for water under a cliff right at the head. A lovely spring existed that disappeared. I was able to get a drink in a full water can underground. The young boy creature appeared upon my return, was examining my possessions, but did not touch anything. As I made my way back, I noticed that the remaining 3 were resting on a shelf in the valley on the east side wall, overhanging rock on the mountainside. There was a lot of moss on the floor, and they had some blankets made of thin strips of dried moss-filled cedar bark that are woven together. They appeared to be practical, warm, and does not require washing. I didn't see much the first day I was there. My food had to be consumed cold. The young man was getting closer to me and showing more bravery, and appeared very interested. When he saw that one of my snuff boxes was empty, I threw it at him, coming. He grabbed it with a cat-like sprang. He showed his sister when he went over to her. The following morning, they played with it all day after learning how to open and close it. Even if I had to shoot my way out, I decided to leave this location. I was unable to remain a lot longer. I had only enough food to get me back to the Toba Inlet. I didn't actually have any idea. I didn't know which way I was going to go, but I thought I'd go downhill and hopefully get out. Close to civilization at some point. Then I rolled up my sleeping bag and stuffed it in my backpack. I packed a few cans, swung the sack over my back and placed a shell in the rifle's chamber, and moved toward the wall's opening. The elderly Sasquatch stood up and extended his arms, his intention to push me back. I wanted to exit, so I pointed to the opening, but he remained stationary, there pushing me forward and uttering something resembling soka soka. I backed up because I didn't want to be close enough. I supposed assuming I needed to shoot out this 30-30 probably won't be just viable on this enormous creature, and all I could do was anger him. I chose to wait because I only had 6 shells. There should be a preferable way over killing him to leave. I returned to my small camp to try to figure out a different way out. I contemplated internally perhaps I can make companions. I didn't know how to talk to the 2 young people, but they might be able to assist me. However, the question of where I would go if I could escape persists. At least I had to. When I was taken, I was 25 miles northeast of the Toba Inlet. This animal, unquestionable necessity, went it in the 3 hours he carried me, at least 25 miles. I considered the possibility that if he carried me west, we'd be close to saltwater. Same thing, assuming he had went south subsequently, he probably gone up or east. Therefore, if I were to travel south and cross 2 mountains, I would need saltwater somewhere between London and Vancouver. I didn't see the old lady until about 4 p.m. the next day. She accompanied him home, arms stuffed with grasses, twigs, various types of hemlock and spruce, and some kind of nuts that originate from the soil. On Vancouver Island, I've seen a lot of them. The young man climbed every day on one of the easterly mountains, and I could see that he could climb higher than a mountain. Goat. He chose a type of grass that had long, sweet roots. One day he gave me some, and it had a very sweet flavor. I gave him a second snuff box that still contained about a teaspoon of snuff. After tasting it, he returned to the elderly man. They had a long wait after he licked it with his tongue. Chat. The young fellow highlighted the elderly person and offered something like, "Ook." I got the possibility that the young man wanted a box for the elderly man, who liked snuff. I shook my head, my movement with my hands for the elderly man to approach me. The young man may not have comprehended what I meant. He visited that day. Neither he nor his sister came near me again. Although I had been there for 6 days, I believed if I could just get the elderly man to come over to me and eat a full box, I would be making progress. Of snuff, which would undoubtedly kill him and cause him to self-harm. I wouldn't be a murderer. The young woman appeared to have no intention of harming anyone, while the elderly woman was meek. The young man was probably about 7 feet tall, and between the ages of 11 and 18, weighed around 300 pounds. His waist was approximately 36 to 38 inches, and his chest appeared to be 50 to 55 inches. He had wide jaws and a forehead that slanted upward about 4 or 5 inches to the back. Superior to his forehead, their hair was about 6 inches long. The remaining hair on their bodies were sometimes short and thick. I was thinking that this might be a place to stop. Additionally, the mountainside plants and their sweet roots may have been in bloom. The season is here. They appear to be most inspired by them. The taste of the roots is very sweet and filling. In any case, appear to thoroughly take care of an explanation and squandered no energy on anything when they were not seeking nourishment. The boy and the girl were always there, despite the old man and old lady taking a break, climbing something or doing another kind of exercise. Most loved position was to grab hold of his feet, then bounces forward while balancing on his rump with his hands. It appeared that the goal was to determine how far could do so without putting his hands or feet on the ground. He occasionally reached 20 feet. I was considering, what are their plans for me? They must be aware that I cannot remain here indefinitely. Soon, I'll have to make my break for opportunity. I wasn't abused in any capacity, and it appeared to be the elderly person was drawing nearer to me each day, and she was very curious about my snuff, continuously watching me when I take a squeeze one morning following my breakfast. This is the boy and the old man who came and sat down only 10 feet away from me. Morning. I prepared coffee. I think when I was making the espresso, the smell brought them over. I was drinking coffee that really tasted good while I was sitting there eating hard with lots of butter, slapping my lips as if it were better than it was. I placed the snuff can in the old male, grabbed it, put it in his mouth, and then licked the can's interior. After a short while, his eyes started to turn over on his head. He was looking directly upward. I could tell that he was ill. After that, he took my half-empty coffee can and dumped the grounds and everything else into his mouth. Did nothing of benefit. He moved away from me several times while rolling forward with his head wedged between his legs and started squealing like a stuck pig. I said to myself, this is it if he comes. As I grabbed my rifle, I'll shoot him between the eyes for my part, but he started in the spring. He was thirsty. The young man ran over as I packed my sleeping bag and remaining cans into my backpack to his mother, causing her to start squealing. I started looking for the wall opening, and I only made it what I fired a single shot at the rock over her head as the elderly lady was right behind me. She probably never seen a gunshot before turning and running inside the wall. I added another cartridge to the office of my rifle and began downhill, thinking back once again my shoulder sometimes to check whether they were coming. I made good time because I was in a canyon and the ground was clear. I assumed I had to have 3 miles and some world record time. The sun was to my left as I reached a canyon turn. That indicated that I was traveling south, and the canyon then turned west. I chose to climb the edge ahead of me. I knew that climbing this ridge would put me between saltwater and 2 mountain ridges. I could see if the Sasquatch was coming after me because I would have a clear view of the canyon. I was able to climb the hill in good time because my pack was pretty light. I soon came to a stop to retrace my steps back to where I came from, but no one followed me. Mount Baker could be seen as across the ridge. I knew then that I was headed in the right direction. I opened my because I was tired and hungry backpack to check my food requirements. I decided to take a break here. I could clearly see the mountainside, and I had the advantage if the old man came to get me because I was above him. He would be required to ascend a steep hill. I began to descend the mountainside when he didn't show up. It was easygoing. There wasn't much underbrush and it wasn't steep. At the bottom of the creek, I made it. I now felt a lot safer in this canyon. I made a fire between two major rocks, and the following morning, I had terrible feelings when I awoke. The dirty socks made my feet and legs hurt. My stomach was vexed. I really didn't know if I would make it. That mountain, I hope. I finally reached the summit. I had to drive there for 6 hours. Visibility was poor due to the cloud cover. Roughly 1 mile after about 2 hours, I realized I had to descend. I got down to the bulky wood and took a seat to rest. At times, I could hear a loud motor running before it stopped. For a while, I listened to this. While and concluded the melody was coming from a logging region. I went looking for people and told them that I was lost as a prospector. I would have rather not let them know that I've been captured by a gathering of Sasquatch, and they probably would have thought I was crazy if I had told them. The next day, I went down on the Salmon Arm branch of the Sasquatch Inlet from a logging camp. From there, I took a steamboat back to Vancouver. This was absolutely my last prospecting trip and my only experience with what is known Sasquatch. I knew that 1924, there were 4 Sasquatchs living there. Might only be 2. Now the old man and the old lady might be dead at this time.